fundraising plan. And this is a summary overview of four basic steps ideally you would do in advance of creating a development plan that we're going to talk about just in brief, and then we'll go into them a little bit in more detail later on in terms of how to do it. Yes.
What page is that?
Thank you guys. The first thing is to, and all of these will just help to lay the groundwork in creating your development plan. So the first step you might want to do is do a fundraising self-assessment, which simply means looking at everything that you're doing around fundraising that you should be doing and saying, how well are we doing this? And this will help you identify areas that need to grow that you might want to put in the development plan. It'll also identify areas that are, hey, we're doing really great with this, that don't need to go into the development plan. Then prioritize your organizational needs is related to strategic planning. And you want everything in your development plan to reflect what's in the strategic plan fundraising section goals. So it's important that the development plan, you could really think of a development plan as a subset of your strategic plan, particularly your fundraising section. So you may have some broad goals and objectives in your strategic plan. The development plan is going to give you the granular stuff that you need to really dig in and know what to do. So it absolutely always needs to be right with your strategic plan. Because, for example, one year your strategic plan might have a goal of, we want to increase foundation receipts by 20%, let's say. That could be a goal for year one in your strategic plan. Then your development plan is actually going to take that and go, all right, how are we going to do that? Do we need to spend 5 days at the library doing research? Do we need to recruit some foundation trustees to a committee? How are we going to do that and figure that out? So that's where the granular steps come in to help you implement that strategic plan goal. You want to prioritize your funding needs, and this would also relate to looking at your strategic plan. If your strategic plan has in it, we want to launch a new program in year 2, but we're going to need to raise $50,000 in order to do it, you're going to want to put some steps in your development plan around how are we going to raise this additional $50,000 that might go in year 1 and maybe part of year 2 of your development plan. So you want to look at what are our funding needs, what are the major areas that we need help with in terms of fundraising. And part of that is also clarifying the case. Why would people want to give? And what do we need to do in order to encourage people to want to give? And that also could become steps in the development plan. You want to look at who might give the money, the donor constituencies, along with how are we going to get the money. If you think, well, we need this $50,000, but that should be fairly easy to get from 3 foundations. You're going to need to do more foundation research, perhaps, to identify who those funders might be, and then figure out your case to fit those foundations. However, if it's a project where you're like, foundations aren't going to like this, this really has to come from individual donors. And we're going to, I don't know, we've got maybe one prospect who might give some of this, but we're going to have to do some work to find some other donors. That's going to put different activities in your development plan, because it's going to be cultivating, identifying some potential donors, cultivating them, and working with them to identify what would float their boats in terms of making a gift. So that's why thinking about the donor constituencies and who might give and what would it take to get there is important to think out ahead of time. And then step 4 is actually compiling the plan and sharing it with your board, your development committee, hopefully if you have one, and hopefully you do. Does anybody not have a fundraising or a development committee on their board? Everybody has one? That's great. And the fundraising committee or the development committee, whatever you call it, should be front and central in helping staff create this development plan. It really should be a team effort. And then once the plan's done, you want to start implementing it, you want to follow it, you want to review it, because it's a living document and life changes. New opportunities come up, new potentials come up, something you think might work, might not. So you're going to need to change it as you go along. So the next two slides are samples of only one out of a million versions of a self-assessment audit for fundraising. To me, it looks a little daunting. It's 32 questions, but it covers the waterfront in terms of issues that you might encounter with fundraising. And the audit is, again, it's important because it's a way for you to find out what do we need to strengthen, because then those things might go in the development plan. What's okay, what maybe needs a little bit of strengthening. And I would recommend that you use whatever tool is going to work for you. If you're a new organization or relatively small, you might want a tool that has like 15 questions instead of 32, that doesn't go into all this detail. This is a fairly, I think, sophisticated assessment for an organization that has an ongoing plan. But it's a very useful thing to go through in advance of launching more fundraising activities. Is there anybody who's done one of these with their organization already?
Mm-hmm. Question for you, Connie.
Good.
I'm with Jenkins Arboretum, and we have paid staff, and we have recently, over the last few years, developed a paid staff member who works with the director on fundraising. And so one of my questions coming into this session is, how does the board work with the director and this staff person to support their activities? What does the board need from them? And you're starting to raise questions in my mind about how do those staff members communicate to the board what they can do to help.
There's a variety of different ways of handling that, of tackling that. What I personally like is if you can have a board that does embrace that this is part of our job responsibility to do. And we're going to talk about it more actually later on, but many people think there is a lot of resistance. Is there anybody who's on a board who would rather lick snow than raise money? Yeah, and that's important to be honest about it. Pardon me?
It's hard to ask.
It is hard to ask for money.
Repeatedly.
Yes, and a lot of people on boards think that's all that I can do is ask for money. But there's about 500 other things that board members can do to further your development initiatives. So not to worry, Joe, there's other things you can do. It's important just to make sure everybody's doing something. And what I would suggest that maybe you do, and I think maybe you already might do this, is to have your paid development person meet with each board member and talk about, say, here we are going into a new year. What are you going to be doing to help us raise money? And here are 10 different ways that you can participate in this. And it can be as easy as inviting somebody for coffee with the executive director, or it could be even easier, which would be writing some thank you notes, making some follow-up calls when someone makes a gift, just calling to thank them. These days people don't answer the phone if they don't know the number, so you don't even have to engage with people if you're a little introverted. You just leave a message. And as a board member, that's a very special message to leave. It's very different than if the executive director calls. I used to, when my mother was alive, I always used to try to get her to give to the causes I was working for. And she was very generous, and I would call her up and make a big pitch to why she should give the money, and she would usually do it, and she was very charitable herself. And I remember one time she called me and she said, "Do you know what happened?" I said, "I don't know. What happened?" She said, "Someone from that organization called to thank me." I said, "Well, yeah, how about that? They listened to me. That's very interesting." And she said, "That's never happened to me." And I think my mother was 93 at the time and had been giving charitably her whole life. So for some people, it really makes a difference, and it's a very low pressure thing. It costs nothing. Yeah.
One that works at Downtown Library.
Yeah.
And our director just brought that up to us a few months ago, and so each of us have taken a month, and she sends us a list.
Yeah.
And we just call, and if the phone numbers didn't work, we just sent them an email, and she gave us a script, and the response has been great. And same thing.
I bet.
It costs nothing. For some of us, it
Costs nothing.
The time commitment is
minimal.
So
That's
it was less
right.
than 5 minutes for me to type up an email and send it off.
Yeah. I was served on a board once, and we were doing that, and I made some calls, and this was back I'm going to really date myself. It was pre-cell phone, so people answered the phone, And I got on the phone with someone, and they said, and I said, blah, 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 what I was going to say, and they said, are you asking for money? I said, no, I am not asking for money. I'm just calling to say thank you. And the person was like, are you sure you're not asking for money? I said, no, I'm just calling to say thank you. It was really funny. They were like, wow, okay, well, this is really nice, thank you. So, yeah, I would encourage you, even something like that. I mean, to take it off the development person's plate or to take it off of the executive director's plate. And there's no substitute for the volunteer in fundraising. There's no substitute for your role because you are doing it just because you care, not because it's your job description. Not there's anything wrong with paid development people, believe me, guys. But it's a very different message when a board member does it. So I would suggest have the development director meet with people, each person individually, talk about what are you willing to do, what are you comfortable doing. It's a volunteer job. You can't change the job description midstream, I don't think. So, yeah.
That's great
Yeah.
suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Along the same lines,
Yeah.
you mentioned that this is a more sophisticated one. Do you have suggestions or recommendations for something else other than this?
I don't have specific ones. What I'd recommend you could do is look down these 32 questions and just pull out the ones that really relate to you or that you really want to know. And you could create your own smaller one. I'm sure online there's, a million different varieties that you could also look at. And the Community Foundation may also have other ones online too.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just important to have something that doesn't make people glaze over and that, which that sort of does to me, but and that's useful, Yeah, sure. So this next one is about what we mentioned earlier about simply aligning your development plan with the stuff that's in your strategic plan. And of course, the first thing that starts a strategic plan is your long-term vision and then your mission and your values. And so it's very important that everything that is in the development plan is in service to those things. So you want to look back to your strategic plan and say, well, when we did our strategic plan, this was what our mission, this was what our vision was if we had one. Some have, some organizations don't. These are the fundamental things that are important to us, and so you want to be sure that those are then reflected in the plan as well. And then that, again, reflecting those goals, those green goals there are the specific goals in the plan, and then the bluish area there is the specifics about how are you going to implement those things. So you're going to just want to make sure that the two documents are together. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you want to prioritize the funding needs. Figure out what is it that we're going to be needing. Why do we need this development plan? Well, we need to raise money. Why do we need to raise money? What are the major issues? And probably for most people, it's unrestricted money. That's what we all need, right? But you may also have some other things. And unrestricted money may be front and center. 75% of what we raise needs to be unrestricted. That's going to guide some of the things that you choose to put in your development plan. So this is going to help you identify what those things are. So you want to ask yourself questions like, what's the need? What's the problem that we're addressing? What's the issue? How do we know that it's a problem? For example, let's say you are doing after-school programs for kids, and one of your major needs is you need a bus to transport the kids. Well, it's not that the organization needs the bus, it's the kids need the transportation. That's the issue. In Chester County, there's no transportation, right? That's the problem. So then you think, why is that important? Because the kids can't get to your programs otherwise. So you want to think about always, what's the issue? Why is that an important issue? What are we going to do to meet the need?
It's also the language that you use.
Pardon me?
It's the language that you use.
It is. It's talking about what's the problem first. It's not the organizations don't have needs. It's the constituencies we're serving.
How we service our population.
Right. And that is what donors care about. They don't really care per se about the organization. They care about kids who are hungry, animals who are suffering, veterans who are homeless, people who can't get medical care. That's what people care about. That's the emotion. I hate to sound crass, but that's what's going to loosen the checkbook. It's not we have a budget of $50,000 and need to meet our goal. That's not the selling point. So you want to think about that. How are we meeting the need? And that's convincing your potential donor, we really have a good solution here, and you should trust us. Because when we're asking people to give money, we're asking them to invest. It's like an investment in the for-profit sector. So you have to convince people you're going to use the money the way you say you will, and you're going to be successful. You've done this before, you know how to do it. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? And then part of course, making a good case for anything, any kind of a sales opportunity is how much is it going to cost? And if you think about it, fundraising in a nonprofit is really the equivalent of sales in a business. Is there anybody here who does sales or marketing in a business? Yeah. And you are the very best board members to do fundraising. Because a lot of you are not afraid to be turned down, because it's like, hey, I've got to ask 25 people to get 10 sales, right?
Well, it's interesting, in the board that I'm serving on, the first thing I did was I developed a marketing SWOT plan.
There you
And
go.
one of the columns is all about fundraising.
Yeah.
So the marketing plan, I'm hoping, and the fundraising plan are going to work together to answer exactly all of those questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See, they're so fortunate to have you.
Well,
Yeah, I
I don't know,
know.
you have to talk to the founding person.
Oh, that could be a challenge. Yeah.
She wrote me in.
Oh, okay. All right.
All good.
Yeah, so how much will it cost? And that also it's not only important in terms of, well, we need a fundraising goal, but it helps to build donor confidence. And that's what all of this process is, this cultivation process is building confidence in the donor that you're going to be able to solve this problem and you're going to use their money wisely. So if you go to them and say, yeah, we'd like to buy this van, but I don't really know how much it costs, but I don't know, I think they're about $20,000. Would you be inclined to write a check? You'd probably say, go back, get a bid, find out what it is, and then come back to me. So that's donor confidence, is showing them you've thought it through. And that may be a long process. Like, for example, if one of your things is we need to build a new building, that could be a 3 or 6 month process of hiring architectural consultants to do space analyses and all of that. It could be a year-long thing. And you'd have to raise money to pay for that service, most likely. So that could even be in the development plan, figuring out how much it's going to cost. Who else is involved? That's a very important element in donor confidence. Donors want to know who else is giving. That's why those donor lists that we all do are so important. They want to know, do you have qualified people implementing this project? If I'm going to give you money to buy a van, how do I know you have someone who knows how to buy a van? Who's going to be in charge of that? And when you say, well, we have a property committee of 3 people, one of whom is an auto dealer, well, okay, maybe, okay, maybe that doesn't sound too bad. You want to find who else is involved also. You may have collaborating nonprofits. That also is a confidence builder. This is a partnership with another organization. We know how to do this piece. They know how to do that piece. That also can build confidence, but that's something to think about. If that's something you need to develop, it would also need to go in the plan. And what do you need from me, the donor? So that's, how much am I asking for? As we all know, I think most of us do, when asking for money, the worst thing is to do and go and say, oh, just give whatever you want. You need to figure out, if it's an individual solicitation, how much do I think this person can give? How much do we want from this person? And say, would like an investment, would you consider an investment of $10,000 in this project? So that's very important to do, so the donor knows what's being asked of them. And that works with larger donors, and with foundations, of course, you have to ask for a specific amount in corporate giving as well. It's important to figure that out, because that's going to help you figure out how many donors are we going to need to get this 50 grand. Yes, question.
Is there a psychology behind that?
Well, does anybody have experience with that, would like to answer that? Thoughts on that?
Like, I know people are more happy to help when they know that other people are
Yes.
helping, when they're in a good mood, when it's like a small community. But in terms of saying, here's a hard number, or is it easier to say, our goal is this, we can go as low as this, give anywhere of a range? Has there been any
It's
Anybody
like-
have thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah. You were just saying, Connie, if you can be specific about what the project is that you're gonna accomplish. It's X, Y, Z, we're gonna do this, but we need X amount of money. Just come and say, we've done the numbers, this is what we
Yep.
hope to accomplish. We need this amount of money. You may find a donor that says, I'm willing to put up half and maybe make a matching program, and then we'll encourage other donors to match. Or you may find someone who says, I think I can give you all the money. You
Well,
don't
that would be
know.
nice.
You don't know, but if you're upfront with what
Yeah.
that's gonna cost,
So that large number.
whatever it is, we need
Yes.
to hire 3
Yeah.
staff people, we need to make a building, we need to, whatever it is, we need the bus.
Yep.
And it's gonna cost $100,000 for this bus. You don't know what that person can come up with. So I would, tell them how much
Yeah.
money you need.
Yeah. The last thing you want to do is under ask,
Yeah, don't be shy.
right?
I think the question was asked, is there a science behind
Yeah.
it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
very, very specific science behind asking people to contribute, just in the same way their volumes written about sales, and their volumes written about marketing, and their volumes written about asking for the order. And this is no different. You're
Yeah.
asking them for a donation, and I think that the more transparent and the more information you can
Yeah.
give someone as to what the money's going to do, how it's going to work, why it's important, what percentage they might be helping, sort of answers that question, like gets right to the heart of the ask.
Yeah. It does.
How it impacts the community.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All
there's-
that stuff. Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
huge
Do
list.
you have a comment? Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback. I'm sorry I didn't catch her name, but Laura. What Laura was saying, because I agree that there's science to it, but I also think there's a lot of art to it, because
Well,
you really
I kind
are.
of meant the two together.
Yeah, and
There's-
you're really building relationships.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
And so it does depend. I mean, I had our largest donor at the last organization I went to. I never gave her a sum of money because she loved surprising me with her generosity. So she loved to send me a check. I'd open it and call her and freak out. So I think it's like, it really, especially at that level, is,
It's very individual.
it's relational.
You know,
It is.
In
It's
a lot of
very.
boards and organizations, I'm new to this whole thing, but it would seem to me that you have angel donors.
Yes, you do. Yeah.
And those angel donors are just like you described.
Yeah.
You know, you can always count on them
Yep.
to help. And it's oftentimes
Yeah.
a surprise.
Yeah.
So you don't need to give them any
Right.
amount.
Right.
You know, you're just like,
It's unfortunately more of a personal relationship and art
Very
thing.
much
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
Okay, hi, I have a new organization, and we have only like a 4 months.
Uh-huh.
So I'm learning a lot here. We need an angel.
Yeah.
Something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In the beginning, we have a lot of individual donors, some Walmart, some these donors, but for us, it's difficult, like maintain that attention in the organization. Like, okay, this is my donation, but that's it.
That's it.
So, how can, with your experience, how we can have more interest in our, I know that is some of marketing, but some maintains that attention in the organization, or how can identify that angel donors that we can do better our raising.
Yeah, yeah. It's a long-term process.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's not a quick snap, here's 3 steps to finding that person. It's really doing your work, getting visibility for what you do, recruiting the right people onto your board, maybe some of whom have connections with such people, or committee members or volunteers. I mean, that's really how this works. It's relational. And so it's just doing all of the work that we're hearing about. There is no quick answer, I hate to say it.
It's an education
It
process.
is.
It's a
It is.
schooling.
It's a cultivation.
I worked for a park commission.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times we laughed at the executive director taking tea with
Yeah.
what they called his ladies.
Yep.
And when they finally passed away, the park commission was listed,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
properties they were looking at
Yeah.
in red there.
Yeah. One of the first things I did when I was a development director a million years ago was bought a coffee set. Because I'm like, I know I'm going to be entertaining people and I want to have china cups. Back then that was what you needed to do. Question 6 is, what do you need from me? That's figuring out the ask. And question 7 is really, really important. And that's a step that we often overlook, is what's in it for me? Why should I give you this money? What am I going to, for some people, it's what am I going to get in return. Certainly for corporations, it's often what am I going to get in return. And it really varies. But front and center is helping the donor to feel appreciated. That's where the phone calls from the board members, the notes on the thank you letters, perhaps donor appreciation events, something like that. For some people, that'll be important. For many, it won't. They don't want anything. But it's making that very clear about what is there something that you need from us in return, and making sure, if it's reasonable, that you can do that.
So you should go ask them.
That's right, absolutely. You could. Do you want to be, this is a lovely gift. Would you like a plaque? This is a lovely gift. Would you like the program named after you? Would you like your name on the building? Oh, whatever. Yes.
Yeah, a lot of times you get revolved around mailings that are looking for donations, and they list certain levels of donations and what you get.
Right.
For those.
Exactly. Yeah, how many coffee mugs and pairs of mittens and stuff like that. Yes, exactly.
You want the building named after you.
That's right. You got to go up. Yeah, right. And the last piece, which is extremely important, is for some donors, not all, but for some, how are you going to know that we've been successful? And that's a piece where you have to demonstrate to some donors, especially foundations and savvy people today, that you have an evaluation strategy so that you can actually measure how successful was our project. You can measure the facts, meaning the numbers of programs you delivered, how many people you reached, how many meals you served, how many miles you drove the van, whatever. Those are the facts. But also measuring the impact, the way that you have made a difference. And that's a little slipperier. It's a little harder to evaluate. For example, at a senior center, you can measure how many lunches got served and how many people benefited. But you need to take the extra 20 minutes to develop the survey, to go and sit and talk with people and say, how much of a difference does it make in your life to be able to come here and have lunch and not be isolated? Is this the one good meal a day that you get? Questions like that. And that's very important information. It's not impossible to gather. But that impact piece is really important. Especially these days, I think, with younger donors who are measuring return on investment. They have that mentality, a lot of them, with charitable giving. So you have to be able to show them, we know this project's going to work. Or when we're done with this project, this is how we're going to evaluate it, and we'll let you know.
I think it's important as an organization to create an impact report every year, or
Yes.
annual report every year that you can share with them.
Yes. And that's also the value of sharing quotes from your clients. If you have an organization that serves people, as most of ours do, but to share quotes from people saying how this changed my life, So identifying your target markets, now that we figured out how much money do we need and for what, now you want to figure out the strategies that you're going to have to use to identify the donors to get this money. And what this is simply talking about is 5 different levels of donors and the levels of giving. And it's important to talk about all of these strategies, because most likely you're going to need to implement a variety of these strategies in your development plan. So the first one is when you're introducing people to your organization, that's your social media that you do, any kind of marketing, PR kinds of things that you do. Is just basically raising a little bit of an awareness about your organization. And people need to know more about you before they're going to make a gift. So if you're starting on the ground level, for example, that's going to be one of the places you're going to want to invest a lot of your time right now. Level 2 is when people have expressed an interest. Maybe they've made a small gift. At this point, you want to use some of your events, perhaps, depending on what kinds of events you do, to sort of encourage them to be interested. You might want to add them to a newsletter list. Those send them updates about things, and you want to put them on your annual appeal list if they aren't on there already. And at that point, your gift is probably, the gifts are going to be fairly small, and the return is going to be low, but the percentage of return is going to be low, but you have to be patient with that because you're building that foundation, of these smaller gifts. And this is where, in particular, I just want to stress the value of monthly donors, of encouraging, does anybody not have a monthly donation plan for their organization, like on your website? That is really one of the fastest growing areas of philanthropy these days, is monthly donors. Because it enables someone to, say, give $20 a month when they might not want to write a check for $240 in one fell swoop. They put their credit card on, they say, fine, charge my credit card every month. They don't even know about it. And there you are. And they have to usually you can just continue the charge unless they tell you to stop it. And it's the retention rate of monthly donors is like 3 times the retention rate of someone who just writes a check and puts it in the mail to you. It's amazing. And there's all kinds of wonderful statistics about like 90% or whatever of monthly donors are continuing donors, whereas you tend to lose like half after a year or two. So it's fairly low time consumption for staff members to do, and there's all kinds of techniques you can learn about it online. It's an area to keep those people engaged, but that's an area of really trying to build that donor base, because again, someone can give you a very small gift, but it can add up after time. Level 3 is continuing. You can see we're sort of continuing the involvement, deepening it a little bit. Level 3, you try to get individual follow-up, perhaps, if somebody's making a monthly gift or when board members call to thank people. You might encourage, if you have volunteer opportunities at your nonprofit, encourage people to volunteer. And research shows that volunteers, people who are helping your organization, are actually more inclined to give because they know what's going on. And yet, paradoxically, so often we're reluctant to solicit our volunteers because we think, they're giving of their time and we don't want to ask them. Well, how do you know? Someone might very much want to contribute financially in addition to what they do. So if you don't already solicit your volunteers, I would encourage you to pull those guys out of your make a select list, write a specific letter to them, referencing their volunteer commitment, maybe have it signed by a couple volunteers who say, we feel so great about this organization, we hope you're going to join in and give with us, or something like that, so that you have people in that group soliciting other people in that group. Level 4 is your major donors. Those are the ones where really always want to be on the lookout to cultivate and develop relationships. And this is where the individual relationships really matter. It's very time consuming, but it's really worth it. And level 5 are your planned gifts, which are like your bequests and things like that. And those are ones, as Laura mentioned, they take years to have happen, but when they do, they can provide significant impact to your organization. So you want to think about, as you're building your development plan, where does the majority of our energy need to be? And then that will guide putting different steps in your plan. Any questions on that? So then just sort of, this is also going to influence the items in the plan. This is just sort of a detail of that previous slide. Where are your donors going to come from? Is it going to be individuals, foundations, to the best guess that we have? How large are they going to be? And what's the approaches? What are the approaches that we're going to have to take to reach out to each of these people? And one of the things that's really important to think about is that today, we have so many different ways to communicate with people. And now it used to be if you printed an annual report, you printed it, you did an annual report, you printed it, and it went out snail mail. Now you can print some, you can do PDFs of some, you can put a link in social media to, there's all these different methods of handling that. But it's not one size fits all. So it's important to know who's on your donor list. For older donors, we like print, right? You like printed stuff that you can hold and look at and put on a coffee table and share with people? You know, we do. I hate to say it, we like printed stuff. Younger donors, the last thing you want is something in your mailbox, right? You want it electronically. So unfortunately, we have to do everything. And that's the bottom line, that if you're doing a solicitation, you can't rely on it all being digital. You're going to have to do some snail mail, but it's just figuring out how do you want to utilize those dollars best. I often get the snail mail appeal and then I'll give online. Because I'm in that sort of, well, maybe, I don't know if I'm in between or not, but anyway, that's what works for me, is I'll hold on to the piece of paper and that'll remind me to do the thing online, you know. And the donor pyramid there at the bottom is a really important thing to keep in mind. The longer the slice, the smaller the gift as it goes up. And it's important to think about, last year in 2023, $557 billion was donated to charities in this country. 68% of that money came from individuals. 8% came from bequests. That's from individuals. So if you add those two together, 76% of that money came from individuals. 17% came from foundations, and 7% came from corporations. So it's not to say you can't get good dollars from foundation gifts or from corporate gifts, but if you're not focusing a lot of your energy in your individual donors, and that's where board members come in, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. Is anybody blown away by those statistics? Yeah, because we all thought it was what? What did you think it was?
Corporate would be higher.
Corporate would be higher? Uh-huh.
It makes sense because with the individuals, you have the opportunity, like the young lady was saying, to develop the relationships and
Yeah.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta pull at the heartstrings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else surprised?
Well,
Yeah.
and like on the corporate level, I think it also depends on the kind of nonprofit that you have, because that's usually a marketing endeavor for them. They want some sort of exposure.
Yep.
So like at Uptown, there's a lot of great opportunities for corporate
Exposure,
because
yeah.
we have so many entertainment options that they can be attached to. So yeah, I think it really depends on the type of organization you are.
It does. You're exactly right. And that goes back to that what's in it for them question.
Right.
For a corporate donor, that's front and center, what you need to talk about. Exactly. Yeah.
I thought it would be more foundation grants.
Yep.
I just think that was
I
the
know.
direction that our board has been looking, that
Yep.
grant versus the other, so
Yeah.
that surprises me.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beauty of individual donors, again, is that they will give to us year after year if we basically treat them right, and especially if you treat them really well, like the follow-up calls and the notes and maybe a birthday card or a Christmas gift, something like that. We will all continue to give year after year to organizations we like. I'm not going to change my giving guidelines. I'm not going to decide, oh, this year I'm putting all my money into here, most likely. I'm going to continue to give to the organizations I care about. Foundations, as some of us know, are constantly doing that. Oh, we're not giving to you anymore. We can't, we're not doing this. We're not doing this geographic area. We're doing something else. And corporations are a lot following what the exposure is and what the market is. Individuals are, if we treat them right, they will continue being faithful supporters.
So if you target your individuals differently.
Yeah.
I just recently moved my 90-year-old dad out of his home.
Uh-huh.
And realized that Wounded Warrior, Towerton, whatever, the Children's Cancer Hospital, the marketing, the ploys, the gift, he literally gets 2 marketings a week from them.
Yep.
They are always in his space.
Yep.
And he always picks it up eventually.
Does he
and
give?
writes a check.
That he does eventually, yeah. Yeah, because those are organizations he cares about. And
But they stay in his face.
They do.
He doesn't forget about
They
them.
do, yeah.
They don't give him
And
out.
and there's a level where you need to be careful with not overdoing it. And I think these days with communications, we have to be really, you're not going to send, 5 emails a month.
But if you use a variety of things.
That's right.
If they're on Facebook, if they're
That's
on
right.
Instagram, newsletter, a text on occasion.
Exactly. And I think the other piece to think about, maybe pertaining to your dad, is and we don't think about this, I think, enough when we're doing fundraising, is that fundraising is giving people an opportunity. Giving money feels good. Right, Karen? You can see her hanging in the doorway. Giving money feels good. You're giving people opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have to make the world a better place. There are so many things in this world we can't change and we can't impact, right? Climate change. What's any one of us really going to, politics, whatever, environment. However, I can make a difference in someone's life by giving $100 to a cause I care about. And that's a beautiful thing, yeah.
I think one thing, I don't know about everybody else, but as an individual donor, the one thing I don't want to receive is a thank you letter with an envelope
Yeah.
and
No,
a
it
slip
has to
that,
be-
it's like,
Yeah.
that was nice, but we'd like more.
How about more? Right. Yeah, I know. How do you feel
Keep
about
those separate.
if you were to get like a printed newsletter or an annual report that had an envelope in it? What would you think about that?
Once a year, that's fine.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Or a link.
No link, even better.
Yeah, or a QR code.
A QR code. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We
See
were
those.
talking about earlier, different
Yeah.
ways that you report back to
Yeah.
people, whether it's an annual report or a link to the website. Sending out snail mail can get really expensive.
Yes.
And keeping that piece of snail mail to high-level overview of the mission, of the the accomplishments, the impact of the community, and then have a link on that if they want to learn more, they can.
Right. And so that's all what we're all sharing here is speaking to we have to do a diversity of approaches because we have, hopefully we're cultivating younger donors as well as trying to maintain our older donors. So we need to be doing all of it. Yeah. So finally, we're at the point of having done all of that preliminary thinking, which may take you a while. We're at the point of creating the actual development plan. You want to be sure to include the tactical steps, make it granular enough so that it's a real work plan. You want start and due dates, and you want to assign who's going to do this. Is it going to be the development committee? Is it going to be a staff member? Is it going to be the board chair or someone else on the board? And you want to have measurable, quantifiable goals so that you know whether you're being successful. That part of it's really important because that's going to also enable you to measure how are we doing reaching this goal. And are we, if we're running short of time and we're way below the goal, we've got to readjust, we've got to think of something else. So that's why it's really important to have your development plan include all of that. And then once, of course, it's done, you want to utilize it, you want to implement it, and you want to assess what's going on and constantly be looking at, all right, we launched this mail appeal, how successful was it? Looking at the statistics. It's just really important to be on it and be always paying attention to it. If you have a development staff, I would use it in their staff meetings. You want to use it in your development committee. I would say at every meeting, you need to be constantly looking at the plan, deciding how are we reaching things, are we staying on target? And I would say share it with the board as well, especially if the board are hopefully taking on some responsibilities. It's important to also celebrate accomplishments. Not only to say, oh, we need to work harder, but it's like, hey, we got this. You did that by sending out 50 appeal letters, or you hosted a cultivation event at your house, and 7 new people were introduced to our organization. It's very important. There's a certain element of cheerleading in fundraising, too, in case you didn't notice. It's important to be enthusiastic about it.
Could I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
What's your thoughts on when you're giving restricted and non-restricted fundraising?
Uh-huh. It really depends on again, back to your organization's needs. I mean, what organizations always need is more unrestricted money.
Right.
However, there are donors who only want to give restricted funds. Many foundations really want to target their giving for a specific thing. Many corporations do as well. So if that's what's going to I'm gonna be crap, that's not gonna make the sale.
Right.
Figure out how to make it look like a restricted grant, and it may not even function that way.
Right. But then you have to get back to the donor.
Yes, you do.
Tell them where the funds went.
And you have to monitor,
Yeah.
you have to monitor the expenses, and you have to be accountable. That goes back to that ethics,
Yeah.
that ethical piece, exactly. Question?
I just have a really quick question.
Yeah.
For people who have development committees,
Mm-hmm.
my organization has tried to have one, it never seems to happen. I was wondering how often
They should meet?
do you
Uh-huh.
meet with them? Like, does the committee?
How often do your various, yeah,
So I'm in an interesting position because I started with Uptown last October, and I'm just doing programming. Then they asked me to take on development, and then they made me the executive director in
oh my
June.
God.
Woo!
You
So,
brave
and I-
woman.
you know, there's been a lot of mission drift and all that. So the development committee did exist pretty consistently, but it was sort of like get together, look at how much we've done. Okay, when are we going to send out a mailing or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
So I have been talking with the board president ongoing. You know, the monthly meetings we have to have very actionable items, but then even kind of like get to the nuts and bolts in the board meetings. Because what happens is you burn out the board members by over meeting, and some of them
That's
might
right.
serve on a couple of committees. So, you know, if we can trim down our board meetings to be like committee reports, nuts and bolts, and then the real work can happen in the committees, people tend to get less burnt out and are more willing to contribute of their time and even like their intellect in that meeting. So once a month has been the sweet spot for us, but if you're just getting it started, you know, maybe it's like every other month, or, you know,
Yeah.
it's also like looking at what the need is.
I think that's a great point. It really is. It depends on the need and how often, you know, you need to get together. I would say like every other month, just because once a month's a lot. But, you know, for a startup or an organization that's in a lot of transition, once a month might be necessary. And if you're working up on an event, let's say, where there's a deadline and we're 6 months away, you might need once a month. You might even need more often in order to make sure you're on target. And I think the important thing is also to take the pulse of the development committee members to find out what works for them. Is this too much? You know, does it work to meet at 5 a.m. on Tuesdays? Maybe not. It would 7 p.m. on Wednesday be better? I mean, it's important to also fit their schedules.
We found it was beneficial, so our board meetings are once a month in person, but then also the committee meetings are by Zoom, and that has also
That makes a big
helped
difference.
a lot. Yeah.
Yep.
And then they also have staff meetings, so we have like a community engagement that also is like our fundraising, and those meetings are back to back. So that way, if you're only part of one subcommittee, you can just hop off. But for me, it's much easier because my husband knows, like, don't talk to me from here to here. you
Yeah,
know, like,
it's
one
too
time,
much.
Because these are the two meetings I'm gonna be in.
Yeah.
And that has been hugely
Yeah,
beneficial. to
good.
have them by Zoom.
Yeah, that's a great strategy, I think, yeah. It's also important to, let's see. It's important to also, at the end of the year, to refresh your development plan. Make sure it's ready to go for the next year. There may be some things that have changed. It's important to know about. And this is just more of a push about why individual giving is so important. The relationship base, that's your major donors on the right side of the chart. On the left side of the chart are your 20% of the funds, 80% of the donors, that's the smaller donors. On the right side, it's 80% of the funds, 20% of the donors. That's why the extra time, all that hand-holding, that cultivation, it takes time, but it's well worth it, and it pays off. Absolutely. And the rest of this, and you can look at this, it's in the book. And if you want the PowerPoint, feel free to let me know. This is about getting board members engaged. These are some of the resistance pieces that boards have. And here is a list. These are lists of a number of different ways that board members can be involved in fundraising. So there's 6 different ways. Only one of them is being an asker. That's number 5, being a solicitor. All the other ones are supportive roles in fundraising. Equally important, but supportive roles. So that should encourage everyone about how to get members involved. And this is just sort of a summary about what we talked about. And the last couple slides here is a sample of a development plan. Like that development self-assessment we looked at earlier, I think it's a little like, it makes my eyeballs spin. This is a little too much. It goes on and on and on. But you want to use, as you can see, it's going on and on. But you want to use a format that's going to work for you. It could be a simple Word document. It could be a simple Excel spreadsheet. It needs to be functional for you and usable so that people are going to want to look at it, want to use it. And that's it. Any questions? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Questions?
I've looked into it and I've seen some data to support it, but what is the tipping point for hiring a dedicated development officer or development director on the staff level?
I would think when it gets to the point where the executive director can't do all that needs to be done, where you're building your organization, you've got opportunities, you've got programs that are sellable, you've got organizational needs, you need money, but you also are in order to accomplish your mission, and you can't do it all, and the volunteers can't do it all. You just need somebody, a professional, to work with an organization to help you take that to another level. I'm working with an organization right now where the executive director has been doing a great job with foundation grants. And can you guess, 95% of their fundraising dollars come from foundations, and we know that's not sustainable, and they're getting majorly cut by a funder, and now all of a sudden they've got to raise another $300,000, and they're hiring a development director because the executive director who could do the grant proposals can't do this other stuff. So, any other questions?
The tipping point comes when the executive director delegates to board members enough of their responsibilities for fundraising and doing these asks and those sorts of things. When they get tired of it,
when they get tired,
dedicate the funds to hire a dedicated.
Yeah, that's a great comment too. Yeah. Well, thank you for choosing this otherwise dry topic. I hope I made it somewhat engaging. And go on out and make some development plans.